In this chapter, we're going to go over rigging and a little bit of cleanup stuff too. So I'm going to go pretty fast here because this isn't going to be the most exciting stuff. But it's really, really important to any kind of pipeline to have a nice clean meshes. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start any kind of rigging is clean up all these models. Anywhere I have these little penetrations, I'm going to move them out. And I'm removing all the modifiers, just collapsing them all down except for the turbo smooths. In fact, I'm going to get rid of those pretty soon too. I'm just overall just cleaning all this geometry so it's as easy to use as possible. And then I'm going to actually condense a lot of it so that all of like the pants and the boots and the straps are all one object. And then I'll turn all the jacket and undershirt into an object. And it'll just make the rigging and skinning a lot quicker to have instead of a million little objects to deal with, only maybe, 4 or 5. So we're just going to, like I said, keep collapsing these things and making sure they're clean. Actually, we're not quite ready for the biped yet, so under the utilities here, we're going to go to the reset X form. It's actually right here. It's already attached in mine. And what this will do is actually turn all the transforms to 0, 0, 0. And then I want to affect the pivot and make sure the pivot is also at 0, 0, 0. And then when done, I want to collapse the X-form modifiers as well. And I want to do this for all these objects. Another reason that you might want to condense all your objects into one instead of, or multiple, instead of so many, just cut it down into maybe 3 or 4. Because this can get pretty time consuming and it's not the most exciting part of the project. But it is one of the most important parts of the project, so you gotta deal with it. So you can see here, the rotation on the pivot is all crazy. Things are just nuts. That's why the reset X form button is great. You just click it, and that'll pretty much reset all the rotations and scales to 0, 0, 0. And then all I have to deal with is the actual world space one, which once again, by right-clicking on any of those scrollers, you can set it to 0. And Blur also has some tools that take care of this, which I believe are actually some free scripts called Mesh Collapse to Origin. And that just collapses everything to 0. But if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, that's how you would go about it. So then on the shell here, I mentioned this earlier, where you override the inner material ID to whatever, something you're not going to use, like 22 or 55. And maybe the edge one too, in case you want to edit that. And then we'll collapse the symmetry. Because on the glove, you don't need all that geometry on the inside of the hand. It's kind of a waste. So I just clicked on that one on the inside and then did a select by face ID. I'm going to convert this to polygon so it's easier to work with. Editable mesh are kind of hard to work with. You can see I did it on both. And I shrank it twice because I want to have a little bit of that rounded edge on the cuff there. So you can do that for anything with the shell modifier on it. And I'm collapsing the hair down with the turbo smooth, and then affecting its pivot to go down to 0. I don't need that anymore. I don't need this. We're going to get rid of all the turbo smooths because when we start rigging, we want this to be as clean a file as possible. And now we have to rename stuff. And it's really important that our naming convention is easy to read and easy to understand. So the naming convention we use at Blur is kind of what I'm going to use here, kind of a variation on it. And you see it says C, Scarface, Body, Mesh. What that means is he's a character. His name is Scarface. This is his body. And he's used as a mesh. At Blur, we have other options that we could put in there too, such as location and many other things, but I won't go into because they won't make much sense without knowing our internal pipeline. Now here's a layer manager. We're going to put the hair stuff on one layer and the body stuff on another layer. And actually, I'm going to use the onion, which is something we also use at Blur. It's just a different type of layer manager. I just know it a little bit better, so I'll use that. So here I'm going to start renaming all of these objects, and by copying and pasting onto stuff that needs new names, such as the hand and the pants And the bandage. And the shirt. You can see all of these keep the same naming convention. The X in this naming convention is for its location. So something like boots or eyes would be L and R for left and right. Say he had these pouches that we wanted to change the names of. Maybe we'd turn it over to top and bottom for the higher and lower pouches. We're just going to turn this to boots. And then he has these straps that we should rename too. This might seem a bit tedious and a little annoying, but it's so important for when you start doing the rigging, because if you have a bunch of weird, oddly named things, it's going to be just a pain in the butt to actually deal with. And we're really going to condense all of this down to a little bit simpler geometry to work with, but I'm going to do this first just to make sure it's easy to understand. So what I did was I went into select by name and I grabbed everything not in the naming convention, and I did an isolate select on that. So we're going to collapse all this, turn it to an editable poly, and change the name to belt. Excuse me, change the name to all of this. And then fading ahead a little bit. You can see that this undershirt, we haven't taken care of some of its penetrations because the jacket covered up so much of it. So it's time to fix some of this before we start rigging, or else we're going to have even more of a headache on our hands. When you've got these multi-layered characters and you start putting their arms down or animating them, it becomes a little bit of a hassle to make sure that nothing is pinching or looking odd in certain angles. So it's really important that we fix as much of it as possible before we put a rig on there. But since we're only going to be doing a temp rig, as we call it, or a sample still rig, we'll actually take the model. We'll actually take the model and edit it. Put an edit poly above the skin modifier to make sure that it doesn't fold in on itself too badly. But we do want to make sure that for the most part it does it all through the rig. It's a good indicator of how clean you made your mesh, really. Just pulling all these points is pretty simple. And then any area that you see that has polygons or stuff that it looks a little more stretched than the rest of it, insert some loops. But some of these areas were just really, really nasty, so we got to clean those up. I always wait till the end to do that, just because it's the little detailing stuff here. I'm going to turn on edge distance to make sure that I can stretch this without affecting the collar. And if we were going to do this for some character who's going to be animated, I'd actually probably attach that collar and the jacket and make sure everything was welded together. Just in case he got to certain angles where it bent in on itself. So here's jumping ahead a little ways. You can see we've attached it as one object now. But one thing I noticed was he doesn't have much detail in that, and I'd like it to have a little bit of a wrinkle going on where the belt is pushing in on that collar. We never did too much with detailing on the collar, so now is as good a time as any before we start rigging. We could also do it while we're rigging, but as you can see here, we're just pulling these out to add a little bit of a wrinkle look to them. I'm using the build end tool to make sure everything is pretty clean. And I just want to break one up so it's not exactly like the other. Once again, using that build end tool to clean everything up. We use a chamfer on it too to split it something so we could use that tool. It's got some cool wrinkles going now, but could use a little bit more work. It's always good to look at it with a smooth on though, because you never know what stuff really looks like until you do that. The little wrinkles look decent. And just like we did before, we're going to pull this out and pull that middle one out a little bit further and then push that one back in so it adds a nice little wrinkle to it. Feels a little bit more integrated now that it's got some detail on it. Just gonna add, want this one to be a little bit longer, so I just add another edge, split, pull it out a little bit more. There we go, it's breaking up a little better. And then we want to unhide what we hid before, which is the entire jacket. And you see sometimes the Turbo Smooth might affect if you hide and unhide stuff, it might just all of a sudden not show it. It gets confused, so just trash it and add a new one. So now it's time to draw a biped. So we go under the Systems tools, under Create, and we just draw a rough biped about the size of the character that we made. And we want the center of his hips to be about the center of our character's hips too. But we're going to adjust all the proportions, so it's about time to get started on that. So the first thing we do is we go into the Motions panel, and we turn, well, we have one of his bones selected, we turn it into Fig mode. And then I go under Body Type and set it to Classic, because it's just easier to look at. It's basically all boxes. And by turning all of our rotations into local, we can make sure that we're actually bending the way the bones will work. And we only want to focus on one side of him because we can mirror over the stuff that we do from one side to another. You can see he doesn't have enough fingers, so we're going to add some fingers here. He's 6 feet tall. Gonna have a little forearm twist. And the upper arm twist is something that I add on this one, but I usually don't use it. It just kind of overcomplicates it. It's actually more of a mistake on my part that I actually added it, but it doesn't do too much bad. It just, you don't need it for this kind of stuff. So to start off with, I just hid everything except for the biped files. And then I unhid the body and the jeans because I wanted to get all the proportions right, but when I have all those objects, it gets really hard to select the right bone. So at this stage right here, you really get to find out how clean you made your mesh. And what I mean by that is how good your anatomy was, I guess. Because when you start laying out these bones, if you have weird warps in the way that your arms are or the way that your spine is, you're going to notice that the biped file does not line up with it at all, and it just becomes really hard to deal with. If you had pretty good intentions when you built it and it was pretty close, it's really not that hard to add a whole new rig to this. So you can see here I went under the copy and paste options, copied one pose, and then mirrored it by copying and then pasting to the other side. And so and what you do there is you want to grab the whole chain of bones that you want to grab, and all you have to do is double click a bone to do that. So if you double click on the shoulder, you'll actually grab every bone that goes into that chain, which includes the fingers. And then when you copy that side and then paste it, it's going to copy and paste all those bones. Anything in the middle, though, you won't be able to copy and paste, and it's the same for when we do envelopes. So when we start adjusting the spine envelopes, you have to do it on both sides. And we'll talk about that later on. So here I'm just making sure that all my rotational joints are about where they should bend on a real human being. So it would start right around there, and I have a local rotation on, and it should go to about the middle of his elbow, and his bicep should and shoulder should start right around the end of his pec right there. And this is his clavicle bone, so we want to make sure that is in the correct area. You can see his fingers are a bit odd right now. We'll affect those in a moment. In fact, we're going to do those right now. Alright, so we want to unhide these biped parts so that we can actually see where the bones go. You can see he's got these little stub fingers, and the reason is because we don't have enough links in the fingers. So I'm going to grab all these. I'm going to go down here. Oops. Got to make sure you're selecting the right part. So sometimes it gets a little annoying when working with biped files because you want to adjust a lot of settings, both in the envelope and then sometimes in the actual fig file or figure file. So you have to make sure sometimes to have different things on different layers so you can lock off areas and whatnot. It makes it a little bit quicker to start adjusting things. So I'm going to start moving these fingers. One thing when you're adjusting these biped, unless it's something like the arm or legs, you can actually move exactly where these points go. So you can see I grabbed that thumb and just kind of dragged it right on up into the into where the joint should really go. You can do that with almost any part that's floating there, including the clavicle area, which will control the arm movement as well. But there is one thing wrong with these fingers. We don't have enough links. So I'm going to go down here. And just looking at your own finger, you can see you have 3 links to your finger. So we'll change it to 3. And then I have it on local rotations again. So I want to get this to line up as the bones in my hand would actually go. And you'll notice here, by clicking page up and page down, you can go up and down the hierarchy of your bones. And by using scale in local mode too, you can that's the way to scale in a biped bone. I'm going to scale that into about where I want it. That's pretty close to how the bones would go in that thumb. I'm going to adjust where the hand starts a little bit more. Then move this back. Then rotate that a little bit. And it's not quite long enough, so we'll change that. We just got, by using page up and page down, we can rotate each one of these fingers. You just want it to basically be exactly where the finger would bend. Each point should be kind of where the joint would go. So by going into local mode, we can move all this stuff into the right place. You can see it was a little bit low. And then hitting page down, we went to the next finger. Gotta rotate this over a little bit more. So you can't rotate on certain axes if it's like number 2 in a chain, but if it's the number 1 in a chain, you can move it and rotate it wherever you want. Once again, see right there, I actually clicked on the glove instead of on the bone. Got a tiny little pinky there. Should be pretty close to where the bone should go, but if it's not exactly perfect, it won't kill you to adjust the envelope still. So long as it's pretty much filling up the area. Okay, so that's about it for the hand here, getting the bones in place. So the only tricky part is getting the hand in place. Then we just want to copy and paste to the other side. About now it's time to start seeing just how well our little rig is going to work. So I'm going to save the file as. And I want to save this out just in case I mess anything up. I'm always able to reload it. So I'm going to save this fig file. And I just have my own little directory I'm going to save it into, called rigs. You can save envelope files, you can save rig files, and you can save poses as well. It's a good idea to save all these things because you can reuse these time and time again. And in fact, on the next disc, we're going to reuse this entire rigging chapter in about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, I don't know. But it'll take us no time at all to reapply all of this to the character once he's textured and we've changed modeling and done all this stuff. So for this stage, it's really easy. Now I want to start playing and seeing how this rig worked. So I turned on auto key mode and I got out of fig mode, and then I rotated one of the arms down. It's important to be in auto key mode when you're adjusting anything for a pose, because that'll make sure that whenever you switch in and out of figure mode, it goes right back to where it was when you initially rigged the character. And here you can see I didn't copy and paste the fingers over, so I'm just going to do that really quick. I have auto key on. I have to turn that off, otherwise it will not work. It'll take me a moment to find that out, though. There we go. Alright. So we go back out of fig mode. We're just going to rotate some stuff around to see how it works. Though we're not really posing the character, so it doesn't matter if we're in auto key, but a couple things to keep in mind when you're in that is when you adjust envelopes, make sure you're not in there because you can key envelopes, and if you're doing multiple frames or poses or animation, it'll be kind of weird if his arms are undulating as he moves. But it could be a nice look. So I'm just gonna pose this. I don't have auto key mode on, so it's gonna be a bit of a pain if I if I go back into Fig mode and snap back out. You'll see here it just erased everything I did. So be heads up about it. I wanted to demo that. I've had entire times where I've completely posed a character and then realized, oh, I didn't turn auto key on. Oops. So here I added a skin modifier, and then under the bones area, I clicked the add button and then typed star BIP, which will add anything with the name BIP in it. And luckily I don't have anything else named that in my file, so as long as you don't have anything with that kind of name anywhere in there, it'll use it as a bone. And once you have everything loaded as a bone, you could start moving the character around and seeing what you need. Now, in something like a jacket, we don't need to add stuff like bones in the fingers or bones in the foot. So if you want to keep things a little cleaner, you don't have to add all those bones. But since we're just posing, I'm going to load everything. I'm a poser. Now you can see the envelopes are really bad on this. It's not moving that shoulder at all. I move this stuff, it's just not moving stuff at all. So I'm going to get it into a basic pose so I can start adjusting the envelopes on this. Now, when I rotate along the axis and I have an entire chain selected, it rotates each one incrementally that way. So it's a good way to curl fingers really quick, is just double click on the root. Now we can click the Edit Envelopes button and start adjusting the envelopes for this. You can see we have some weird fall-off stuff happening on the spine. So since I can't use the mirror mode here, I'm grabbing each point of the spine and just pulling it in a little ways. And what I can do here is I can either select the tiny gray boxes floating in my max window, or I can go into this bones menu here and just click each bone that I want to adjust. So the fall off is a little bit high here. It's actually affecting my arms for the spine, which just, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have that. So I'm gonna pull these in, and on your bones you're gonna see that there's two different circles. You have the interior circle, which kind of has like a bell shape to it, and then these big ones that I'm adjusting now. And what that is kind of your focus and then your soft fall off. So you can have a giant fall off and have multiple bones affecting it, but if you have two of the harder areas affecting a part of the body, it'll cause some odd creasing. So you want to keep that down to a minimum. Some of it is okay, and some of it will happen, but the fall offs, you know, they can affect a little bit of here and there, but you don't want your spine fall off to be affecting your arms. That'll cause some weird deformations. So since we can't use the mirror mode on these center points, we just have to kind of eyeball it or look at the numbers as we move them, because they're going to be the exact opposite of what we do. If we move one on the x-axis, we want to move the other on the negative x-axis. So going out of skin mode again, we can look at what we've done. We've got some really weird warping going on here. It's perfect. As I said earlier, we're going to actually take this in and adjust an edit poly modifier and possibly do some ZBrush on it to make it look a little bit better, but that should be for tiny little bits. We want, for the most part, to see that the rig would actually work with this character. So we really do have to do some of this envelope adjusting. But as you get used to it, it really won't take too long. You can pretty much rig a whole character and get him posed in about an hour. See, we're dialing up the fall off here, and now we're dialing up some of the more hard area because we want to keep that pretty sharp. We gotta start looking at these spines and seeing what they're doing, because most of the time when your arm has weird deformations when you start moving it, it's because the spine was doing something strange. So keep an eye on the spines. See, we're a little bit forward, so a lot of this stuff isn't affecting the back, which isn't good. So editing envelopes, it's one of those experiences where you just want to turn some music on and tweak, 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 because it can take a little while to get everything just the way you want it to look. There's certain things in 3D that are kind of that experience. Once you get used to them, they just become this kind of mindless task. UV mapping is one for me where it's not difficult. We have a lot of tools now that can really make it pretty easy, but it's just one of those, it's not very much fun. You kind of just go through and adjust it till it looks right, and it's kind of mindless, which can be kind of nice sometimes after doing an entire character and figuring out wrinkles and edge flow and texturing and hair and all this stuff. It can be kind of fun to just have this one moment where all you have to do is kind of just, does this look okay? No. Okay. How about this? Yes. Yay. So it's kind of fun sometimes to just have those little menial tasks. You don't want too many of them, but every now and again. They make you appreciate the fun stuff more too. So we'll just keep adjusting these. I want to hit a little bit more of that back. The back is, as you can see, the jacket has a little bit different, it's a little thick, it's kind of wide. He's a big guy. Barrel-chested. I just want to keep dialing these things in. What's nice is it's all real time, so you can kind of see what's going on. See, none of this is actually affecting the arm, so that's good. Now you can see I'm actually moving the where these are located on Y right now. So I'm trying to dial them back a little bit more so they hit a little bit more of that back. And I can already tell that these are going to hit my head pretty good. Now, every skin modifier you do will have different envelopes. So you can have it's kind of a good idea to try and build your base one first, which really we probably should have started with the body, and then duplicate it and then adjusted that for something like the jacket and the pants and the gloves and all that. But it's okay. It really is it's all very close. I mean, he doesn't have that baggy of clothing on, so you can see this one side is a little messed up. We're gonna just rotate this arm down, but I don't have auto key on, so everything we're doing here could end up just disappearing. But I like to try and rotate stuff around and see exactly what it's doing. Just keep moving stuff and seeing what it's doing. Here, nothing's being affected, really. And later on, when we start adding more objects to this, we're going to go back into Fig mode before we add it. But you don't want to... So here, I turned back on auto key, and now I'm just lightly tweaking every little bone that I moved before to make sure that it stays where it is. So long as I just move stuff a little bit, it'll be okay. You can see there the hand, I think, snapped back a little bit to where it was, but since we have auto key on and we move some stuff around, it actually just it'll key it all that way. So if you moved a lot of stuff and you realize it, just make sure you start wiggling some stuff around once you have auto key back on. So his back is a little wacky, but the front's looking all right. Turn back on auto key and go back into Fig mode. Might be about time to start adding some more objects. Starting with these gloves, because the hands are something we're going to have to spend a little bit of time on the enveloping as well. So once again, I'm just going to type star BIP, select, and then I'm going to click a bone. Well, first I'll go in here, click a bone, and go out of Fig mode to make everything kind of snap down. And let's see what happened. Well, we haven't moved any of the fingers yet, so it's time to see what this does. Oh boy. So we've got nice noodle fingers. Everyone likes those. So we're going to start adjusting these. So I always bend stuff into place before I start adjusting it because I want to see what it's really doing. You can see here I'm making a big mistake by adjusting envelopes when I have the audio key on. it's not a big deal for this because I'm only posing him into one pose, but it could become problematic later on if I was going to move him around. So now, there we go. So I turn that off. And it's time to start adjusting this. You can see he has this really, his knuckles seem to hold his form okay, but the finger itself is totally deflated. And on something like the fingers, you don't want to go too noodly, so you really gotta pull up that middle one to keep a little bit of the hardness. There honestly isn't too much fall off going on these parts, except for a little bit on the tip, I guess, and a little bit on the initial knuckle. And the other thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing the finger enveloping is that you don't want to dial these too big because you're going to start affecting the fingers next to them. It's kind of a tight area. It's one reason that we modeled the hand pretty spread out with the fingers and also a little bit relaxed, is so that we didn't have to worry about too much stuff interfering with each other. There we go. It's holding itself a little bit better now. A little noodly on that finger, but it's much better than it was. And by double clicking that and rotating, you can see that we're moving all of them incrementally down. But you can also see that the skinning is quite horrible, so it's time to fix some of that. Most skinning is pretty easy, but the hand is always a little tricky. So once we get it into a pose that we like, we'll start adjusting the skin again. And because the actual biped adjustments are floating above it, I'm just going to open up another viewport here. I think it's the first time I've opened another viewport in this entire chapter, in this entire disc. I pretty much only work in one viewport. Just dialing all this up to make sure it's affecting the right areas. You can see you could dial it way up if you wanted to. Up the fall off. And then finally we get this last, the little nub here. And we adjust that. You can see the whole thumb is being moved now. That's good. To start. It's a little bit of a pinch right there, so we're going to pull that up a little bit more. Then we're going to do the same thing here. A little bit more fall off on these bits. See, really not much of the finger is being affected by these at this point. So we dial up that middle point, it helps a little bit. So we're just going to keep pulling these out. And rotate the camera around to make sure that whatever angle we do is going to hold up and keep that bone structure in the fingers at least somewhat. Getting pretty close though. You can see that pinky is completely folded in on itself though, so we're gonna have to adjust that a lot. After this, most of the other parts are really easy to envelope, and it's just a matter of tiny tweaking. But you'll see if we dial this up too much, we're gonna start affecting the other fingers, so we don't want to do that. See, we just hit the other fingers right there. We gotta be careful about that. That's where it can get kind of tricky when you've got something like a pinky. It's a very small area, but it's also very close to a lot of other places, like the other fingers and whatnot. But if it holds the form, we're happy. So we pull this up, And now, we don't have to do this on both sides. We can use the mirror mode to copy and paste the envelopes from one side to the other. The pose isn't great though, so let's adjust that a little bit more. Now what we're doing here too is when we're making this pose, we're also thinking about what it's going to look like in the final render. And you could go as crazy as you want. You could have him crouched down or, flipping the bird, whatever you really want to do. But we kind of have a standard at Blur where we just kind of put the arms down, give a little bit more of a relaxed feeling to the fingers. Maybe bend the fingers, and what I like to do is just kind of turn the head a little bit. And there's a couple little things about turning the head when you've got a character like this that I'll show you how to do when you've got hair and eyeballs and teeth. But right now we just want to adjust all the fingers so that they have a kind of cool little, going for kind of that itchy trigger finger look here. Seeing how badly that deforms the wrist there. I'm not going to go too limp-wristed with him, but... Alright, so we got a jacket, we got gloves. He's got 4 arms looking. It's amazing. This is a big chunk right here, is doing this guy's body. But it's not difficult. It's just a lot of what we've done before. I'm going to add a skin modifier to this. And we want to make sure that we're in Fig mode when we actually add this, because if we're not, it can be a little weird. So I'm going to take the jacket, and we're going to see if we can use the same skin modifier on both. So I'm going to copy it, grab the body, delete that skin modifier I had before that had nothing on it, and then paste instanced. It takes a moment when you paste instanced with the skin because there's a lot of information on there. So I'm going to save this file as. You can see I have a lot of iterations of my save files. I probably over save my files, but it does come back to save you sometimes. Also turn autosave on. It'll freeze your computer a little bit sometimes, and when you're working it gets a little annoying, but there's always that one time where it's the savior. You can see what this is doing. It's the skin on this is a little high. So I could either adjust this and hope it'll look okay on the jacket, or I could break this off and make it unique from this point. I'm going to try and work with the same skin modifier on both though. And we can see already that this is not even at all on the spine. One is way high and one is way low. It's time to kind of fix that up a little bit. So we grab that center point, drag it down to about the same point. And you can see I'm not doing this exact because, once again, this pose is so very simple that it doesn't make sense to spend too much time getting it just right. But you do want it to be fairly accurate on both sides. Once again, just adjusting all of this so we don't have so much pinching. Pull up some of these. It's looking better on the body now. And the question is, how will it look when we take the jacket back on? Well, it's not good and it's not bad, but it works for both at this point, so that's good. But it's more important that the jacket looks good from the back than the body part looks good from the back. So you can see I went into mirror mode and I pasted from the envelopes. There's also to paste from verts from green to blue, but we didn't do anything on any. We haven't done any vert painting on the weights, and we're not going to either. That's just more work than we want to do. So shoulder's getting a little weird, oddly pinched. You can see the body is poking through, and we don't want that to happen. But let's see how it looks. It's always good to do a couple of renders to see how things are showing up. We don't have any hair, so we could actually turn the hair effects atmospheric off at this point, but whatever. So we're just going to render this out and see if it looks strange when he's standing there or if it looks okay. If we see any areas that are really pinchy, then we know that we have to keep working on that. Everything looks different when you actually put a render on it. And it's also nice to see the character in a different pose. But you can see right there in the underarms, it looks horrible. He has horrible underarms. Okay. So we have some work ahead of us.